Alright brickers, I think it's time we made some EN lines for the turbo. Let's go! Drifts and lifts. So we need to make an oil drain for the turbo, an oil drain line. If you can see through there, we've got our AN10 going into the block, and we're gonna have another one on the underside of the turbo. We just need a line to connect the two, and let's make the line. The best way to cut this PTFE AN line is to use electrical tape to tape up the end and then cut through it with an angle grinder. And you need to make sure that you cut it absolutely square, otherwise you can potentially have a leak. Now we're ready to remove the tape and construct the line. Just before we actually make the line itself, I've just offered up the fitting. So I've got a 30-degree AN10 PTFE hose fitting here, which I've screwed on to the underside of the turbo, you can see there, and that 30 degrees basically just points straight at where the line goes into the block. And I've got another fitting on the bottom of there. We just need to measure this to see how long our line's going to be, and then we're going to get on with making it and attaching it to these two ends. I've got my line here. By my rough calculations, I think it's going to be about 15 3/4 centimeters, 157.5 mil. So call it 157 mil. But with the fittings, these are the PTFE versions, by the way, for PTFE line, which is just like good for fuel and oil and stuff. You can do non-PTFE, just like nylon as well, which got some of that line as well, which I can use for the oil cooler if I wish. But the different fittings, whether it's PTFE or non-PTFE. Anyway, with these, you kind of slide them in there. So measuring the length is a bit awkward because I think it sits on a collar about a centimeter in. So I've taken 2 centimeters off my measurement to get to like 157 mil. So I'm going to cut a line to size for 157 mil on this. Use metal vise, and we'll make it, and if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, we'll just go again. The first thing I need to do is to slide the end of the fitting onto the line, and here it's handy that I've taped it because it keeps the end of the line together, but even still it is already trying to separate, so it's a little bit tricky. So just kind of twist the fitting on. Yes, we got there eventually, and you can see I've now removed the tape, ready to assemble the rest of the line. So just put this little collar on the end of the PTFE and just make sure that on the inside of the line that it's sitting absolutely flush on this little metal collar. And the next step is to push the end on. Again, this was a little bit tough, but just give it a little bit of brute force and it went straight in, and then we're ready just to screw the fitting together. Excuse any blood you might see on my hand. The braided line is sharp, especially when it's being cut. So here you can see that I'm just screwing it in as far as I can by hand, and then after that, that's when we get the adjustable wrench out to fully tighten it. Now, I had bought these softer jaws for my vise in order to protect the EN line when I was putting them together, and it turns out these were a bit too soft and didn't really work so well. So even though people do advise to use the soft jaws to protect the fittings, I ended up just using the actual vice jaws themselves unprotected. I just held one end of the fitting in the vise and then used the adjustable spanner to nip up the fitting. And I use the adjustable one because all of my spanners are metric and these are imperial sizes. And you can see, even though I used the vise, well, I did round it off a little bit with my adjustable spanner, but that was my fault and nothing to do with the vise. The vise didn't really do any damage to the fitting. Just constructing the other end of the line, you can see I pushed the metal collar on here and you can see inside there it's flush against the PTFE line. And again, we are trying to put the end of the fitting inside the metal collar. And you can see here I am struggling a little bit, whoops. And I eventually found that just giving it a few light taps on the workbench got it seated in there absolutely flush. We're just pushing the collar on there and then starting the threads by hand. Just screwing as far as I can before I put it in the vise to tighten it up properly. Got our first mock-up of our oil drain for the turbo with straight on one end and then a 30-degree on the other, and we've made our line connections on both sides. So let's offer it up. Just start this on here. With it being so tight, I've decided that it's best to just screw it into the block first. It's a little bit fiddly, and then afterwards I will attach it to the turbo end with the two M6 bolts. Just a quick one on the oil feed as well. So what I've done, instead of going too close to the exhaust manifold, I've got a 90 to come out of here. It goes around the turbo and then underneath, and then around the water pipes again to there. Oh well, I guess it goes the other way around, you know, from here to the turbo, but you know what I mean. So that's oil feed and oil drain done. Make the end lines for the turbo done.